The sticky note was stuck to my father's medication case with a strip of masking tape, written in my sister's neat, looping handwriting like it was a grocery reminder. "We need a break. Handle your own father for once. Don't call us." That was it. No date. No phone number. No groceries in the fridge. Just that note, and the sound of my father's labored breathing coming from the back bedroom like something slowly tearing. I had driven 11 hours straight from Cincinnati when my father's neighbor, Mrs. Paulson, called me at 2 in the morning. She said she hadn't seen anyone come or go from the house in almost 2 days. She said the lights were on but no one answered the door. She said she could hear coughing through the wall. I let myself in with the spare key my father had mailed me 3 months ago with no explanation. Just the key in a plain white envelope, my name in his handwriting, no note inside. At the time I thought it was one of his old man quirks. Now, standing in his dim hallway with that sticky note in my hand and the smell of stale air pressing against me from every direction, I understood it was something else entirely. My father was in bed, propped against 2 pillows, his face gray and drawn. His COPD inhaler was on the nightstand, empty. The portable oxygen concentrator in the corner was unplugged. His water glass was bone dry. He opened his eyes when I walked in, and instead of relief, what crossed his face was something closer to grim satisfaction. "You got the key," he said. "Dad, I'm calling 911. His hand came up off the blanket. Slow, but deliberate. "Not yet. You're not breathing right. Your oxygen. I've been worse." His voice was hoarse but his eyes were sharp, the same cold dark eyes he'd had my whole life, the kind that didn't miss anything. "Sit down, Marcus. I need to know you're ready before I tell you where to look." I sat on the edge of the bed. My hands were shaking. I didn't let him see. "Your sister," he said, "thinks I'm too far gone to know what she's been doing." "Dad. She's been wrong before." He paused to breathe, slow and deliberate. 3 years ago, she told me I needed help managing my finances. Said it was getting too complicated for me. Said Derek could handle the investment accounts because he works in banking. His mouth twisted at the word. I let her think I believed her. What did she do? He didn't answer that. Not directly. He said, "Behind my recliner in the living room. There's a loose board in the baseboard. Push it left, then pull." He closed his eyes. "Go. I'll still be here." I called 911 first. I told the dispatcher my father was in respiratory distress and gave the address. Then I went to the living room. The recliner was heavy but it rolled back on the hardwood without much resistance. The baseboard behind it looked ordinary, painted white, slightly scuffed at the bottom. I crouched down and pressed the board left. It shifted. I pulled. A section about 8 inches wide swung outward like a small door, and behind it, in the space between the wall studs, sat a fireproof document bag with a combination lock. The combination was my birthday. I knew that without being told. Inside was a manila folder, a thumb drive taped to a business card from an attorney named William Carr with a handwritten note that said "Call him first," and a sealed envelope with my name written across the front in my father's careful print. I opened the folder. The first page was a bank statement for an investment account I didn't know existed. Or rather, an investment account that had existed. The balance showed $412. 3 years ago, based on the statement stapled behind it, the balance had been $340,000. Page by page, the story assembled itself in my hands. My sister Angela and her husband Derek had convinced my father to grant Derek limited power of attorney over the investment accounts, framing it as a convenience measure. My father's primary care physician had written a letter at the time also in the folder confirming that my father was mentally competent and had agreed to the arrangement under no duress. That letter was dated the same week the first large withdrawal appeared on the statements. I understood then. My father had gone to the doctor specifically to create that record. He hadn't been confused or manipulated. He'd been building a paper trail. The withdrawals happened in chunks. Never round numbers. 47,000 here, 62,000 there. Transferred to a joint account belonging to Angela and Derek, then dispersed into 3 different accounts my father had traced through bank correspondence he'd somehow obtained and filed in chronological order. He'd circled the routing numbers in red pen. He'd written dates and annotations in the margins in his small, precise handwriting. There were also property documents. My father owned the house outright, paid off in 2009. 8 months ago, Angela had presented him with a refinancing agreement that she described as a way to access cash for home repairs. The document he'd signed, according to the notation my father had clipped to the copy, was not a refinancing agreement. It was a deed transfer to a holding company registered in Delaware under a name that didn't belong to any of us. My father had signed it. Then he'd photographed every page before Angela took the original. I sat back on my heels on the hardwood floor with 300 pages of evidence in my lap, and I understood what I was looking at. This wasn't a folder. This was a case file. My father, a retired high school history teacher from Knoxville, Tennessee, had spent 3 years quietly and methodically building the legal foundation to destroy his own daughter's future, and he had waited, patient as stone, for the right moment. The ambulance arrived before I finished reading. The paramedics stabilized him in about 20 minutes. His oxygen levels came back up. They wanted to take him to the hospital for monitoring, and he agreed, which surprised me, until I realized he'd been waiting until someone else was in the house before letting himself be taken somewhere. He'd held on until I arrived. That thought sat in my chest like something with weight. I followed the ambulance in my car. On the way, I called William Carr. He answered on the second ring as if he'd been expecting the call. He told me my father had retained him 14 months ago. He told me the Attorney General's Elder Financial Abuse Unit had already received a preliminary complaint and was awaiting the complete documentation package. He told me there was a second envelope, not the one in the document bag at his office, sealed, to be delivered to Angela and Derek only after my father had been seen by a physician and his condition was documented. He told me that envelope contained a formal legal notice of civil and criminal intent, and that it would also be filed simultaneously with the probate court the morning it was delivered. Everything had already been arranged. My father had set a clock running, and he'd handed me the key to wind it. Angela called me that evening while I was sitting in the hospital hallway waiting for my father to be settled into a room. I watched her name light up on my screen for 4 rings before I answered. "How is he?" she asked. Her voice carried just enough concern to sound real if you weren't listening carefully. "Stable," I said. "Good. Derek and I have been so worried. We needed a few days to decompress, Marcus. You don't understand the stress of being the primary caregiver. We've been doing everything for months and it just became, where are you right now?" A pause. "We're in Gatlinburg. We needed the mountain air. We were going to be back by. Come back tomorrow morning," I said. "There are some things we need to discuss about Dad's estate." Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear the calculation happening on the other end of the line, the mental arithmetic of someone deciding how much to worry. "Of course," she said finally. "We'll be there." She brought Derek. They showed up at my father's house at 10 the next morning, Angela in a pressed blouse and Derek with his weekend stubble and the easy smile he'd been wearing at every family event since the day he married her. They came in like they owned the place, because for the past 8 months, they believed they did. "Where's Dad?" Angela asked, setting her bag on the kitchen table. "Still at the hospital. He'll be there another day or 2. I was standing in the center of the living room. I hadn't moved when they walked in. "Sit down." Derek's smile shifted slightly. "Is everything okay?" "Sit down," I said again. They sat on the couch. I picked up the folder from the coffee table. I'd made copies the night before and left the originals with William Carr, and I set it open in front of them without a word. Angela looked down at the first page. The bank statement. The $412 balance. She looked up at me. "Marcus, this is..." "Keep going." Derek reached for the folder. I let him take it. I watched his face as he turned the pages. The easy smile didn't disappear all at once. It left in stages like something draining. I had set up my laptop on the coffee table connected to the TV. I pressed play. It was a screen recording my father, sitting at his kitchen table about 6 months ago, speaking directly into the camera in the unhurried voice of a man who has already decided what he's going to say. He named Angela. He named Derek. He named amounts, dates, account numbers. He described the deed transfer in the same tone he used to describe historical events to his students, measured and exact. He said he had been mentally competent for every transaction and had documented his competency through his physician at each stage. He said that any claim to the contrary would be met with medical records, witness statements, and the recorded testimony he was in the process of creating. He looked directly into the camera at one point and said, "I loved you, Angela. I want you to know that I knew exactly what I was doing when I let you do this. I needed you to believe you'd already won." The room was very quiet. Angela's composure held longer than I expected. She had always been the composed one, the older sibling who never raised her voice because she didn't need to. But I watched something shift behind her eyes as the video played, a recalculation of enormous scale. "This is not what it looks like," Derek said. "It looks like $340,000, I said. "We were managing those funds for his benefit. The Attorney General's office will enjoy hearing that explanation." I reached over and stopped the video. "His name is William Carr. He's already in contact with the Elder Financial Abuse Unit. The full documentation package goes to them tomorrow unless I make a call to delay it." I let that land. "I'm going to give you both a chance to do the right thing before that happens." Angela turned to look at me for a long moment. In 31 years, I had never seen her frightened. She was frightened now, and she was trying very hard to look like she wasn't. "What do you want?" she said. "A full accounting of every dollar. In writing, notarized, delivered to Carr's office within 7 days." I kept my voice level. I had practiced this. "The deed transfer reversed. The holding company dissolved. And both of you will sign a statement acknowledging what happened and agreeing to full restitution, or the civil filing goes forward alongside the criminal complaint." Derek stood up. "You can't just sit down." "Derek." He sat down. I think it surprised him as much as it surprised me. "Dad spent 3 years putting this together," I said. "He is not confused. He is not diminished. He is a 71-year-old man who taught history for 34 years and who understood exactly what was being done to him and chose to let it happen because he wanted to make sure there was no way out for either of you. So, before you tell me what I can and can't do, I want you to understand that he did not build this case for me. He built it because he knew this day was coming, and he wanted to make sure it was airtight." The room stayed quiet for a while. Outside, a car passed on the street. Somewhere in the neighborhood, someone was mowing their lawn. Normal Tuesday sounds, ordinary world, while the two people on my father's couch watched their careful architecture come apart. Angela was the first to speak. "We need to call our attorney." "That's your right," I said. "Call him. Have him call Carr. They can work out the details." I picked up the folder and closed it. "But the filing timeline doesn't change. 7 days. They left without saying anything else." Derek's easy smile was gone, and I didn't think it was coming back. Angela didn't look at me on the way out, which was the most honest thing she'd done in years. I went to the hospital that afternoon. My father was sitting up in bed, reading a paperback Western, looking considerably more like himself than he had 48 hours ago. He put the book down when I walked in. "How'd it go?" he said. "They're calling their attorney." He nodded. "They will. Doesn't matter. Carr has everything. Their attorney is going to tell them the same thing I tell them." He picked up his book again. "Pull up a chair. I don't want to talk about this anymore today." "Dad." He looked up. "Why didn't you just tell me? 3 years ago, when it started. You could have. You were in Cincinnati building your life." He said it simply, without accusation. "I needed them to believe they had me. If you'd known, you would have come back. Angela would have seen it in your face. She knows you." He paused. "She doesn't know me. Not the way she thinks she does." I sat with that for a moment. "Were you scared?" I asked. "Being in that house alone?" He considered the question seriously. The way he considered every question. "A little," he said. "Mostly I was angry. 30 years I gave her everything. Every opportunity, every benefit of the doubt." He looked at the window, at the pale afternoon sky outside. "Anger keeps you warm when you're waiting." I stayed at the house that night. I slept in my old room, which still had my high school track ribbons on the wall and a poster I'd forgotten to take down when I left for college. I lay in the dark and thought about my father sitting in that house for 3 years, watching his accounts drain, watching his daughter smile at holiday dinners, filing papers by lamplight in the evenings, and waiting. In the morning, I called Carr and told him to proceed on schedule. 5 days later, Angela sent a 40-page email. She called it a financial summary. Carr called it a partial admission. Her attorney called twice and spoke to Carr for a total of 3 hours. On the 7th day, notarized documents arrived at Carr's office. Partial restitution agreement, acknowledgement of unauthorized transfers, deed reversal paperwork. It wasn't everything, not yet. But it was enough to restructure the civil filing and, more importantly, enough to establish a record that made the remaining criminal exposure real. Derek resigned from his bank position 2 weeks later. Angela posted nothing on social media for 22 days, which was, by her standards, the equivalent of going dark. My father came home from the hospital on a Thursday. I had refilled his prescriptions, stocked the refrigerator, and serviced the oxygen concentrator. He walked in the front door, stood in the hallway for a moment taking in his own house, and then went straight to his recliner and sat down. He didn't push it back from the baseboard. He didn't need to anymore. I brought him a glass of water and sat on the couch across from him. He looked better. Not young, he was 71 and he had COPD and nothing was going to change either of those things, but he looked like himself again. The grayness was gone from his face. Carr says the restitution will take about 18 months to complete, I said. But the deed is already reversed. The house is yours again, clean. He sipped the water. I'll be staying for a while, I added. Work lets me remote in. It's not a problem. He looked at me over the glass. I don't need a caretaker. I know you don't. I leaned back. I'm staying anyway. He set the glass down on the side table. He looked at the window for a long moment, at the afternoon light coming through the curtains and long flat bars across the floor. Then he said, "You know what the funny thing is?" "What?" She thought she was taking advantage of an old man. She never once considered that the old man had been paying attention. He shook his head slowly. 34 years teaching teenagers. You learn how to wait. You learn how to let people believe what they want to believe, and you file everything away, and you wait for the right moment. He picked up his book from the side table, the same Western from the hospital. Patience is the one skill nobody bothers to steal from you. He opened the book and found his page. I sat there in the quiet house listening to the ordinary sounds of the neighborhood outside and thought about the key he'd mailed me 3 months ago with no explanation, just my name in his handwriting and the knowledge, unspoken, that one day I would understand what it opened. I understood now. That night, after my father went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold in front of me. Angela had texted me once in the past week. The message said, "I hope you're happy." I had screenshot it and forwarded it to Carr, and then I had not responded. Because there was nothing to say that the documents hadn't already said more clearly. My cousin, Leah, texted separately. Just, "I had no idea. I'm sorry. If you need anything." I believed her. I wrote back, "He's okay. Thank you." She didn't respond, and that was fine. Some people sit with things before they know how to speak. I thought about what my father had said. Not the part about patience, though I would carry that too. The part before it. She never once considered that the old man had been paying attention. That's what Angela had gotten wrong from the beginning. She had looked at him and seen what she wanted to see, a man getting older and slower, a man who needed managing, a man whose memory and sharpness could be quietly undermined by the steady application of condescension and manufactured helplessness. She had confused his silence for decline, but my father had always been quiet. He had been quiet the same way a library is quiet, not empty, not hollow, just full of things waiting to be read. I finished the cold coffee and rinsed the mug and turned off the kitchen light. Outside, the Tennessee night was clear and cool and enormous. I stood on the back porch for a few minutes, listening to the crickets, looking up at a sky dense with stars the way it only gets this far from city light. The kind of sky you forget exists when you spend too many years in a place with too many streetlights. I had a voicemail from my boss that I hadn't returned. I had a lease renewal coming up in Cincinnati I needed to decide about. I had 31 years of being the younger sibling who lived far away and didn't want to get involved and told himself it was because there was nothing to get involved in. I had a lot of things to think about. But right now, in this moment, standing on my father's back porch in the dark with the whole quiet weight of what had happened settling into place around me, what I thought about was a man who spent 3 years being robbed by his own family, who never once let them see him coming, who mailed a key to his youngest son without explanation because he trusted that, when the time came, his son would know what to do with it. He had been right. I had known. Some legacies don't look like money. Some of them look like a plain white envelope with your name on the front and a door you didn't know existed waiting on the other side. I went back inside and locked the back door behind me. In the morning, I would call Carr and ask about the timeline. I would check on my father's prescriptions. I would make eggs and not mention any of it because some things don't need to be talked about every day, some things just need to be done. But tonight I sat back down at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and started writing everything down. Because this wasn't just my story, and it wasn't just my father's story. It was the story of what happens when someone mistakes your stillness for weakness, when they look at the people who love them and see only what those people can provide, when they confuse kindness for naivety and silence for surrender. They are always wrong. They are always surprised to find out how wrong they are. And the ones who love you quietly, the ones who watch and wait and file everything away in fireproof bags behind baseboards, those are the ones who understand something the thieves never will. Patience outlasts cunning. Documentation outlasts denial. And love, the real kind, the kind that mails you a key without explanation and trusts you to figure out the rest, that outlasts everything.